Though Mario is still fairly popular, we are far removed from the peak of his cultural relevance. That isn't to knock the Italian plumber, I still enjoy his newer titles, but without a doubt, the days of him shaking up the industry with every release are long over. I think it's hard to argue that the peak wasn't during the mid-80s to late 90s, and perhaps the peak of that peak was leading up to and the release of
Super Mario Brothers 3!
What other game has gotten a feature-length ad to hype it up before release? This game was huge. The first game was revolutionary. The second game, both in Japan and in America, have an asterisk next to their names that prevent it from being the true sequel. The original Japanese release being more of an expansion to the first game because of how similar it was to that game, and the US version being a completely different game originally. This game, on the other hand, can be viewed as the true sequel, expanding and perfecting the formula that the original established. Look at the first game and look at this game, and it's honestly surprising that both of these are on the same system. The difference is night and day. There is a reason that this game is so many people's favorite Mario game. Without a doubt, it's the best on the NES. It's arguably the best 2D Mario game, and at the time of its release, it was probably one of, if not the best game ever made. But we are far removed from those days, and platformers haven't been the preferred genre in gaming for a few decades. People tend to forget how important this man really was.
Mario! Mario!
Mario! Mario! Mario! Mario! Mario! Mario!
He's back. All you had to do was ask.
I would love to see a day where Nintendo releases a Mario game and it's unanimously agreed to be one of the best platformers of its time and the best entry in the franchise. Until then, we'll have to look at the first example of that being the case, Super Mario Bros. 3. I'm not gonna lie, after Mario 2, I knew I was gonna have to do this game and I wasn't very excited for it because I didn't really like this game before this review. I've always tried to play it, but then once I get to like World 2, I just didn't like it. Just didn't really enjoy it at all. But that may have changed with this playthrough. And by may, I mean it definitely did. Mario plays mostly like he did in the first game, but with some changes. His jump feels more floaty than it did last time. I didn't mind this at all. As a matter of fact, I didn't even notice the difference until I sat down and thought about it. It being this way makes platforming a bit more manageable. We now have a power meter that shows how fast you're running, making a sound when you're at max speed. This is mostly important when using a specific power-up. Mario will now be reverted into Super Mario if he gets knocked out of a power-up, instead of turning into normal Mario. I personally like this change as it makes things more forgiving. If I'm not mistaken, this was a change made for the American release, which would explain why Mario goes from raccoon to normal in the title screen.
USA, 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 I am...
You can now pick up Koopa shells and hold them with the run button, something that I'm pretty sure they took from Doki Doki Panic. You can do the same with these light blue blocks as well. They aren't super common, but there are a few levels that are vertically oriented like the ones in that game. Hell, it even has a screen wrapping thing going on. There are now slopes that you can hold down on the D-pad to slide down on, which will make you the one to touch damage enemies. Don't let go of the down button prematurely though. New are these P switches, which will turn blocks into coins and coins into blocks for a short time. They also can make doors appear when in a mini fortress. The note block, which I hate, can be jumped on to gain extra height if you time your button press right. If you get it wrong though, all you're left with is a total loss of your previous momentum, and you'll probably fall into like a bottomless pit or something. I can never get the timing of these things right, it sucks. Come on. Power-ups come back with some force this time around. We get all of the original ones, the Super Mushroom, the Fire Flower, the Starman, and the 1-Up, which all work like they did before. Though the Starman once again doesn't last as long like it did in Mario USA. Also, the Super Mushroom no longer travels to the right when found, now it's dependent on what direction you're facing when you find it. Though I'm pretty sure I've had it gone the wrong direction regardless of where I'm facing. New to the game is the Super Leaf, which will turn Mario into Raccoon Mario. While running at full speed, Mario will be able to fly for a short time period by rapidly pressing the jump button. It's not a very long time where you can do this, but it's long enough to be useful pretty much whenever you can do it. While not running at full speed, you can press the jump button while falling to slow your fall. I used to not like this ability since you had to press the button repeatedly instead of just holding it. It doesn't bother me anymore. As a matter of fact, I kind of like the pressing of the button instead of just holding it. It's really good for correcting positioning or just playing it safe around tricky platforms. You also do this spin tail when you press the run button. It's only kinda useful as an attack though, since the range is so short. You are safer just jumping on the enemies like normal. The frog suit lets you have way better movement underwater, though it reduces your land speed to simple jumps, like a frog. Not a very common power up, but it's definitely useful when playing some of those harder water levels. I also just like the concept. Frogs are cool, and this art looks pretty cool too. The P-Wing, which you can only get in a few spots outside of the levels themselves, is Raccoon Mario with the power meter maxed out all the time. This only works for one level, and then after that it reverts to the normal Raccoon Mario. The power meter being maxed out obviously means that you have infinite flight, so this power-up is definitely worth it for some of those harder levels. The Tanuki suit works just like the Super Leaf, but you can also hold down B to turn into this invincible statue for a few seconds. This has something to do with the Japanese myths or something, I don't know. This one doesn't start to show up until about halfway through the game. Finally, we have the Hammer Brother suit. Simply put, it turns you into a Hammer Brother. Not only is that cool on an aesthetic level, it's also pretty powerful, given the fact that these hammers can kill pretty much anything. Okay, maybe not the nuclear waffles. It's pretty rare to compensate, which makes losing the power-up all the more painful. As I'm writing this, I realize that I never ran into the Karibo shoe, which is a power-up that only appears in one level, I think, and it lets you jump on enemies that you normally can't. I don't feel like going back and getting footage of it, so here's a picture of sad Luigi. I'm not sorry. Now, very, very rarely, there are some times where you need a power-up to move forward in a level, like a specific power-up. These happen so rarely that I really can't complain too much, but I am still going to complain a little bit. I don't think that's a really good way of managing like a puzzle element in this game. Power-ups are supposed to be extras. They're like an additional thing you can get to assist you. They're not, they shouldn't be like the way forward, you know what I'm saying? They should help you move forward in the level, but they shouldn't be the only way to do so. Like if I don't have this one power, I just can't move on. That's kind of lame. It's kind of cringe. You know, it's kind of 3D Mario-esque vibes. And those power-ups in those games kind of suck, so, you know, It's so rare, though, that it's really not a complaint, but I did feel like bringing it up because I did notice that. This game is rocking an inventory system. You can only access it from the map screen, but this makes things a lot easier. Dying no longer means that you have to start as normal Mario again. You can jump right back in as Fire Mario or Raccoon Mario, or maybe you just want to go in with the Starman to make the beginning of a level easier. You also are going to have to pick and choose when and when not to use them, because, you know, you have a limited amount of these things, and not every level needs you to use them. Especially not levels with power-ups towards the very beginning. At that point, you're just going to wasting your inventory, so don't do that. The other items you can get are a Cloud, which lets you skip a level. Though if you use it and fail to beat the level you skipped to, you'll be booted back to the last level you beat, which means that you'll have to play the level you skipped initially. Use this wisely, and definitely don't use it to start playing the next level. The Hammer, which can break rocks on the world map, which can be used to get to different areas faster. The Music Box puts the Hammer Brothers to sleep so you can pass by them without fighting. The Magic Whistle, which is used to warp to different worlds. Also, it sounds kind of like the whistle from... That was like Mega Man, right? Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was Mega Man. And finally, the Anchor, which will keep airships from moving around the map. Enemies are also greatly expanded from the original. Again, having all the OG mooks plus new ones. The Goombas get a para variant this time around, as do the Beetles. I didn't mean to say it like that. I think those only appear in one level though. Fire snakes are annoying, but they are pretty rare, and I think they only really appear in desert levels. The Fire Chomp is also pretty rare, but it's a lot more dangerous based on where you encounter him. It's also not as easy to take out. The Chain Chomp makes his debut here, being a lot smaller than it will later become. Something Miyamoto dog reference. It's easy to mistime your jumps when you're around these guys if you aren't careful enough. Cheep Cheeps have this black variant. I didn't notice any difference though. Gelectro is more of an obstacle than an actual enemy, and it sounds like a Pokemon. Lava Lotus shoot lava balls at you. They are pretty slow moving, but underwater movement in general is slow, so it balances out. I also like the transparency thing they're doing with the sprite. I like it. It's nice. It's pretty cool for a 8-bit system. Spike, which is a strange little guy. Definitely more dangerous than the average Koopa. I think other than the bullet bill, nothing moves at you this fast. Well, except for the buzzy beetle when it's on the ceiling and it falls down. Bombs, which made their way over from Mario USA, I don't mind these guys as much as the original ones. There's never a point when they're spammed at you like in Mario USA. You also can pick them up, which isn't too useful. Rocky Wrench? Okay. Not Monty Mole here throws wrenches at you at different elevations. So even though they're pretty slow moving, they can still catch you off guard. Thwomps make their debut here as well. Getting close enough to them will trigger their fall. Though there are also these versions that move horizontally. They only appear in mini fortresses alongside the nuclear waffles, which are called rotodiscs, and the Boo Diddly. Boo Diddly? I don't get it. Their gimmick is that they only approach you if you aren't looking at them. Hotfoot is literally just a bit of fire from a candle. They also work exactly like the Boos. If you're looking at them, they won't move towards you. Dry Bones are immune to fire damage and can't be truly killed. Unless you're using a Hammer Brother suit, but then you can, but whatever. Coming back to life after a few seconds. Stretch, which I absolutely hate. They pop up way too quickly, and there's just not enough time to really get a feel for when you should move, when you shouldn't. It's just, I hate it. Piranha Plants make a return with a lot of new variants. I hate the Piranha Plants in this game. The Venus Fire Trap variant will shoot fire at you at an angle. Pretty annoying when you have to deal with more than one of them at a time. These these guys that blow these spike balls up and down. Not too hard to avoid, but they do walk back and forward, which can throw you off. We actually get the return of the red piranha plant from Mario 2, which is pretty interesting to see. I bet I'm one of the few people on YouTube to actually point that out, though. The white jumping ones aren't too bad, you just gotta watch out and jump as high as you can to avoid damage. And the munchers are invincible, and again are another enemy that are more of an obstacle than an actual enemy. One-on-one, the piranha plants aren't too bad. It's when they throw more than one of these things at you do things start to get stupid. Finally, we have the Hammer Brothers. The Boomerang Bros throw socks at you. The Fire Bros are only in this one part, right? I don't think I saw them anywhere else. The Sledge Brothers really should have been called Sledgehammer Brothers, but okay. They're big and chunky and hard to jump over and can stun you with their jump. I really don't care for these guys at all. A big change is the world map. Previously, you played levels as they came at you, with a few chances to skip entire worlds at a time. This game introduces the map screen, which lets you move around the world kinda like in a board game. We get the normal levels like always, but this time they're not all mandatory. Toad's house is where you can get a power-up that will go into your inventory. We get two different kinds of spade panels that can appear, one being a roulette game to earn extra lives, the other being a flip card game to earn extra power-ups. There are only a few different configurations for the card flipping game, so you can just look up the card patterns and then win the game. Otherwise, if you fail 2 times, the game will end and you'll have to wait to finish it later. Unless it glitches out like it did for me, and it just keeps on putting me back in there even though I finished it and then lost on purpose a few times. Yeah, that was weird. I kind of wish I would have taken advantage of this a bit more, but I was afraid of the game like crashing or something. Hammer Brothers will roam throughout the map as you play. Running into them means you have to face them off in a battle, and once you win, you're given an item. Finally, we have the mini and normal fortresses, which we'll get into a bit later. There's a lot more levels this time around. World 1 has 8 playable stages, but they can all be beaten relatively quickly. That's the case for most of the game. They're over before you know it, which is a good thing when you realize that there's no midway checkpoints like there was in the first game. You also won't have to play every level. There are a few that you can skip depending on the world. Sometimes you have the option between playing one and not the other to move forward, giving the game some more replayability. I didn't bother with playing all the levels for this review, but maybe one day I'll go back and 100% this thing. New type of level that some might want to skip are these auto-scrollers. Personally, I don't mind them at all, but I do get why people don't like them. Bottomless pits, the slow-moving platforms. If you mess up near the end, you'll have to do it all over again, which can be annoying. None of these problems really affected me though. I enjoy the challenge. And I really like the auto-scroller in the last world. I also love the music that's associated with these levels. Koji Kondo really outdid himself this time. The original game's soundtrack is iconic, but it was pretty short. There's a lot of variation here that doesn't feel repetitive at all. I don't know, I feel like I should stop talking about music in these reviews because I really don't have much to say other than it's pretty good or it's okay or there's a lot of variation. That's all I have to add. Let's move forward. You listening to the soundtrack throughout this review, you know it's good. I don't need to... You end the level by hitting this block, which will give you a card. Collecting 3 will get you an extra life. Collecting 3 of the same will grant you even more lives, with the best option being 3 stars that will give you 5 lives. This is kind of like just a better version of the way you get extra lives from Super Mario USA. With an extra life guaranteed after beating 3 levels, you'll notice that getting extra lives has never been easier. Skilled players will rack these suckers up rather quickly, while newbies won't be left too far behind. Speaking of newbies, 2-player mode is an option again. Both Mario and Luigi play exactly the same this time around. There's no ice skates or flutter jump for Luigi. Instead of one player playing until they die and then switching to the second player, you take turns. Levels that one player beat don't have to be played by the other, so things are actually cooperative this time. Mini fortresses are like the final levels of the worlds in the first game, though often you'll find these towards the middle of the world, with later worlds having more than just one. Instead of facing Bowser, you face off with the terrible Boom Boom. Boom Boom is a joke. He later flies or something? I don't know. He dies way too fast for me to even notice. Him being so easy though can psych you out because you don't want to die to something this pathetic. Beating the fortress will unlock a shortcut of sorts, which is useful for co-op. These are also one of the few things you don't have to play again if you game over. Speaking of which, gaming over will restart you on the world you lost on. But you'll keep all your items in your inventory, so if you're about to lose, maybe just hold off on using them. Also, if you're in co-op, only the levels that you beat will be reset. You can actually use this fact to cheese most of the game actually. If you collide with the other player, you'll enter this competitive minigame that's just like the original Mario Brothers. So in theory, you can beat all the levels leading up to a level that you know you'll have some difficulty on with player A, then have player B do said difficult level as many times as need be. I did this with my girlfriend a few years back when we were trying to outrun the sun, which yeah, the sun is an enemy in this game. Not nearly as hard as I remember this being though. I'm guessing I'm better at 2D platformers now because of my experience with the first game, the second game, and the second game. The fortresses, well, they're really just castles, but okay. This is where you will find the king of this land, who has been turned into an animal by one of the Koopa Lings? Kids? I think it's Lings. Koopalings. Alright, story time. So the Mushroom Kingdom is at peace because of what Mario did in the first game, but the larger Mushroom World is currently under attack by Bowser. Bowser. Didn't he die? I'm probably the only person to ever care about this, but I've cared about this since I was a little kid. Bowser died last game, did he not? At least in the first game. What happened? Why is he back? I don't think any single game ever even attempts to explain even a little bit, and really just goes to show it really doesn't matter. It's always bothered me that he dies, and he's just back, and there's like no rhyme or reason for why. I mean, they could just say like black magic, and actually after, I think every game after this point, like he doesn't actually die, you just beat him, but he definitely dies in the first game, and kind of in this game depending on how you defeat him. Anyways, Bowser is using his minions to terrorize the larger Mushroom World, turning the kings of said worlds into animals with the use of their magic rods, giggity. Mario and Luigi go out to stop them. The manual says that these guys are Bowser's kids, but that was only ever a thing in America. Their names are Larry, Morton, Wendy O, Iggy, Roy, Lemmy, and Ludwig von Koopa. I did that on my second take. They all work mostly the same. They do have some variations between them, but for the most part, they are all identical. Worst one being Ludwig because he can stun you with his ground stomp and I hate it. Before reaching them though, you have to go through these airship sections. They are auto-scrollers that are also kind of like a bullet hell. I mean, that's the only thing I can really compare it to, okay? I understand this isn't as intense as a real bullet hell, but for Mario standards, this is. I really like these, both in difficulty and in theming. A lot of people like to bring up the fact that Mario 3 is actually a show play. Look at the curtain, look at the shadows on the backdrop, look at how everything's bolted down, yada yada yada. That might be the case, but this is definitely a play based on real events. The next game has a downed airship as a level, which is obviously one of them that's in this game, And that game isn't a show play at all. I'm like the only that cares about Mario lore. After beating them, you get a letter from the princess with some useful information and an item attached to it. Worlds have themes to them, like in Mario USA. World 1 is Grassland. Pretty basic first world, not too long, but it's long enough to give you a good feel for the game. Desertland was usually when I turned the game off in the past. I'm not the biggest fan of desert themes in Mario games. This game might even be the reason for that, actually. Never liked these micro Goombas in the blocks, never liked the angry sun, none of which was a problem for me this time around, which I was really surprised by. World 3 is Waterland. Not all the levels are water themed, funny enough, but this world has my least favorite kind of level, by far. The ones with the big Cheep that's chasing after you while the level bobs up and down. I don't like these at all. Boo, go away. Go with Jasmine. I also didn't enjoy the Hammer Brothers camping the water tile, because the arena you fight them in is dependent on where they are on the world map, so since they're over water here, I get shallow water arena, which makes it hard to move. It sucked. Unsurprisingly, I ended up using the frog suit here. This world also has Japan in it, with the king looking a lot like Mario. Mario is the king of Japan, yeah, it makes sense. World 4 is Giant Land, where everything is bigger. Honestly, this is kind of cool for the NES. I like the one level that has you changing between big and normal enemies. Also, I'm pretty sure this is like the exact layout in the Japanese version of Mario 2. Like, this seems way too familiar to not be. Other than that, the world is pretty standard though. World 5 has you starting off on the ground, and you make your way up to the sky. And look, you can even see the first half of the world from here. I just noticed that while writing this, that's kind of cool. A lot of bottomless pits after this point. P-Wings and Super Leafs come in clutch here. This world has a pretty cool mini fortress in it, and it's also pretty hard, with lava shooting up and down from the ceiling and floor. This isn't a floor, but you know what I mean. Making timing your jumps very important here. Don't choke on Boom Boom. It's just Boom Boom. It's just Boom Boom! World 6 is Iceland, so everything is slippery, and I don't like it. It's actually not that bad for the most part, but yeah, I don't like slippery. It does look nice though, I will give it that. I don't remember anything from this world. World 7 has some funny music if you don't consider the fact that you don't smoke mushrooms with the pipe. Can you smoke mushrooms? I don't think you do, you just eat them. Let me look that up. Yeah, no. You cannot do that. Yeah, freaking nerds. Idiots don't know how drugs work. You're like, oh yeah, drugs, pipes, Mario does shrooms. It's funny. Like, no, dude, that's the wrong drug. The joke doesn't work. Stupid nerds. I'm gonna bully nerds. Bullying is good. This world really likes to play around with the whole maze concept, not just being a straightforward thing. It's kind of like some of the end levels in the first game. You know, some were maze, but it's like worse. Yeah, as you can tell by my tone, I'm not the biggest fan of this kind of thing. It's not a bad idea inherently, but I'd rather just deal with a platforming challenge. This is also where the game gets noticeably more difficult. It's been on a pretty steady increase up until this world, and then it just kind of shot up. At least that's how I felt about it. And I could just be saying that because of the piranha plants and how hard I find those things when they're in this grouping. But it's honestly not a big deal since World 7 has the best mini fortress in the entire game for grinding lives. You see this room? It's full of blocks. You see this P-switch? The room resets every time you leave and come back. Yeah, do the math. The result is 99, by the way. Well, I guess it's 98 unless you beat the thing after getting the whole lives, because, yeah, it's just Boom Boom. Once you beat Ludwig and save the final king, we get a letter from Bowser, saying that while we've been saving the rest of the world, he's gone and kidnapped Peach. We're back in the princess saving business, boys. I absolutely love the assault on Bowser's territory. Makes sense that it would be this heavily protected by tanks, boats, and other airships. Even when you manage to sneak past them, you still have to deal with these hands that can drag you into these levels. Ah, damn cheap bridge! After all that, we finally get to the first numbered level in this dark area. I love the blacked out pipes, the desolate desert, and overall the grim tone that the Darkland gives off. I think this is the only game where we actually see Bowser's dominion. I mean, we do see his like castles in other games, but I mean, this is like canonically where he lives or rules from, right? I mean, why else would there be a Darkland, you know? Bring back the Darkland, Nintendo, this is cool. After facing a pretty chaotic final tank section, we face Boom Boom one last time. It's just Boom Boom. After that, we get to Bowser's Castle. It's honestly not that hard as previous final levels, which isn't a bad thing necessarily. I mean, it's not a walk in the park either, but there is this one up that basically means that you're never gonna game over at this point. Not that we're in any real danger of doing so. After a while, we come across these oh so familiar fireballs coming at us, and shortly after that, we get to Bowser himself. Instead of dropping him into lava by cutting a bridge, we gotta bait him into destroying the floor and falling through it. Not too complicated, but he can trip you up with the timing of his fireballs and him actually jumping. Also, the lower half of him doesn't actually do damage, so you can just sit here with him, which is weird. Also, you can bounce off his head, look at that. Just to experiment, I safe scuffed my way to him with the Hammer Brothers suit on, just to see if I could beat him with it, and yeah, it turns out you can. At first I thought you couldn't because it didn't seem like I was doing damage, but no, yeah, I was doing damage. It doesn't take too long to beat him normally either. Once you do so, he falls down to God knows where, and you go and save the princess, which looks just like she did in Mario USA. I don't know which sprite came first, if Nintendo America made the princess sprite for that game, or Nintendo Japan made this game. I don't know, I don't feel like looking that up. I'm Luigi. Hey, it's me, Luigi. I was sad. Also, there's a reference to the first game. I think this means that the phrase, "the princess is in another castle," was gaming's first meme ever. After that, we get a fantastic credits song, and that's it. The game is over. You can restart the game from there, at which point you'll have a full inventory of P-Wings, which is a nice little reward for beating the game. If you couldn't tell already, Super Mario Bros. 3 is a fantastic game. It improves in every single aspect from the previous games, and sets up the standard for 2D platformers again. That's right, what Super Mario Bros. Did for the 2D platformer, Super Mario Bros. 3 did for the Mario franchise. Set the standard going forward and influence pretty much everything that came after it. I'm gonna keep this running gag going as long as I can, dude. It's not perfect, but I mean, it almost is. Sure, I had my frustrations towards the end, but I'm more inclined to think that was just a skill issue than the game being poorly designed. With a few exceptions, of course. Again, I went into this thinking that I was going to have a much worse time with it than what I ultimately ended up having. I absolutely had a blast this time around. Most things that annoyed me in the past were just not a problem for me this time around. Things that I thought were difficult weren't. Again, I think this is mostly based on my experience with the first three games, technically. I've seen some people call this a masterpiece. I personally reserve that label for very few games, but I would probably throw this game a bone and call it an 8-bit masterpiece. It's probably in the top 3 of NES games, or just 8-bit games in general. It's challenging enough without being too challenging. The enemies aren't a pushover, but you know, they also aren't ridiculously insane. And yeah, that's the end of the review. Thank you all for watching. Hope you all enjoyed. Leave a comment, yada yada yada. I'm not comparing this game to any Zelda or Metroid game, just because the next 2 Zelda and Metroid games are for the Super Nintendo, and there is already a Super Nintendo game. What? And there is already a Mario game on the Super Nintendo, so it makes more sense to compare those 3 than to compare 2 Super Nintendo games to this NES game, you know? It's a bit more fair. But perhaps I'll do a 1v1, because I think it was either after this point or slightly before this point in time that the first Sonic game was released, so I'll probably review that at some point and then compare the 2. Yeah. Next video though, for real this time. I was gonna say Mario. Minecraft video. Yeah, I don't know when that's coming out. Hopefully within a month at least, at the bare minimum. I'm not using that word correctly, but I don't care. I gotta finish this video because it's coming out tomorrow, and yeah, I blame AJ. All right, peace out.